On this edition of Conversations for Change, our special series at We the Women, where we bring you change makers, different change makers from different walks of life every week, it is my pleasure to welcome from the cast and crew of Dolly, Kitty or Wo Chamakte, Sitare, Konkona and Sharma, and filmmaker Alankrita Shrivastava. This film, if you haven't watched it, is a must-watch. It's a film like much of Alankrita's previous work that explores the boundaries and the gilded cages that often trap women. Sometimes those gilded cages come in the form of what is most celebrated, the institution of marriage. We women sometimes do not even notice it, but we are trapped in chains of gold. And when we talk about sexuality and our desires, our dreams, we are often judged. And worse, as we see every day, we are character assassinated. This film seeks to question exactly all of that. But how far does it really travel? And it's one thing to talk about this in cinema. Can you actually translate this into real life? Would we dare? What do women actually want? That's the conversation I'm going to have with my two friends today on the program. And I'll start with you, Alankrita, if I may, because parallels have been drawn with Lipstick Under My Burkha. The common theme, of course, is that you're always pushing the boundaries when it comes to exploring female dreams, female desire, female ambitions. But when I watched the film, what I was struck by was this question. How much of this would we dare to carry into our own lives? Or is this just cinematic respite from the gilded cages that we all live in to varying degrees?
Well, one hopes that when one makes a film, that it triggers some sense of some thoughts, some self-reflection, some conversation, some debate, and that could change something in how you're living your life or how you view your own life. But I think films are also often a sort of mirror to society. So I'm not so sure how much a film can actually lead to like what kind of concrete change. But I definitely think that more thoughts, more reflection is the way to go. More questions to ask, those kind of things.
Sure, and I agree with you that often art can only ask the questions, and it's still left for all of us to answer them. But it's an important conversation, and Konkona, it's a particularly fascinating conversation when you see the obsession with another Netflix series, Indian Matchmaking. And I bring this up because one of the things I think that nobody actually questions is the premium placed on marriage as an institution when it comes to women. And I'll share a little story with you, and then I want you to respond. The other day, somebody on Twitter whom I don't know kept tweeting saying, normalize marriage over 30, normalize marriage over 30, please normalize marriage over 30. And I just wrote below that, or normalize no marriage at all. In the other words, the choice must be with women and men, right? It's not just about women. But this enormous premium placed on marriage, the way we look at women who are not married, the way we look at women who are divorced, the way we look at women who want to step out of marriages that don't fulfill them. And that is a theme in this in this work of art that all of you have created. The absence of fulfillment and romance and spark, the absence of that sitara in a marriage. How does a woman deal with that?
I think that, it is what would be lovely is that if individual women could make their own choices. I think one of the key ways to be able to make choices is, of course, to have economic independence. So I would like champion that cause above all else, because I think once you have that economic independence, you have many more choices at hand, and then you're not forced to live a certain kind of life. And the second thing is that, of course, we have some societal conditions about how women's lives should be, and there is a prescribed path, but that doesn't necessarily lead to, fulfillment or happiness or, feeling worthwhile or meaningful. And that, perhaps it is time to even just look into ourselves and introspect and reflect on what it is that makes us happy. It needn't be things that society is telling us to do. And, we have to, be in touch with ourselves and our inner beings to see what is making us happy and how we can change those things. And as I said, economic independence really helps with that whole thing. There are some people who may wish to, be fantastic homemakers. There are some women who may wish to, be very ambitious and, achieve a lot in their careers, and both are equally respectable. We must allow them these things.
But I'll push you on that because I always find choice a somewhat dangerous word when it comes to the gender debate. Because till we have men who also opt to be fantastic homemakers, till we have men who also opt to be fantastic parents over and above their careers, as we sort of romanticize women who make those choices, is it really equal? I just find that the focus of our feminist conversations have been so much on equality at work instead of equality at home, Konkona.
No, absolutely. I just want to, what happens is when we, I just don't want to be that kind of feminist who's telling other women what to do.
Sure.
I'm just like all for, that kind of freedom of what you wish to choose. And absolutely that men should also, be equally good homemakers, etc. And, which is why when I made my film Death in the Ganj, I chose to look at masculinity and patriarchy, etc. Because I feel that that's very important and that impacts both genders. Patriarchy actually equally disaffects both genders. So that is also equally important. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's a great point because so many men are actually much more imprisoned than at least PLU, people like us women, are able to be. We have the privilege to question the sort of the chains that are thrown around us. Alankrita, I was particularly fascinated by technology in this work of art, Dolly, Kitty, or Chamakte, Sitare, because does technology set us free or does technology imprison us further? And I ask this because both of your key characters, one is at the other end of a phone line where she's sort of, cooing and being coquettish, and eventually she finds someone that she likes at the other end of the line. I don't want to give too much away about what you've created. And then there's Konkona's character Dolly, but there too there's a delivery boy, but that's again, in the world of the Zomatos and Swiggies, there is a whole parallel universe that technology offers us, but is it a real world? That's the question. So does technology set women free or does it imprison us further? Does it keep us less real?
I would say that the reality that we live in has definitely changed because of technology. I think we no longer can think of a world without, say, technology, without social media and things like that. So I do feel that now I think the impact of an event that might happen to you on social media has a very real life impact on you. Like supposing you're a young teenager and you get shamed through some photographs on, on say Facebook or whatever. Their kids are not on Facebook, but whatever, they're on Insta or whatever. It will have that kind of impact on you. And I think with Dolly, Kitty, or Chamakte Sitare, I did not really go so much into like the impact of technology, but of course that new India, where there are these delivery services, there are these kind of apps and all of that. So it's a changing India, and there are like new job opportunities which exist in this kind of landscape, and what choices those opportunities sort of bring. And so that's something that I did want to explore, but I feel that there is no going back now. We are our online personalities are also part of us, I feel.
So the other interesting thing that comes up, of course, is how neither sort of misogyny nor feminism are gender specific. And I ask this because, Konkona, your character in particular starts off as this sort of married woman who doesn't want to hear ill about her husband who has, to borrow a cliche, a roving eye that extends to your sister, your cousin. And when she first broaches you with that possibility, you just don't, you're in absolute denial and you're kind of judging her instead of judging him. And it's actually very interesting because in real life, women never want to hear anything about their husbands. Even when there are affairs, it's always the other woman's fault. It's always the woman is seductress. It's always the woman who's immoral. It's always the woman, like even if you've seen that movie State of Play, that finally the woman makes peace with the fact that her husband had an affair because he was set up, right? So this thing of being ensnared by another woman. I'm just wondering how you navigated that space in your character, and maybe even in the rest of life, in all of our lives.
Right. I actually haven't seen State of Play or Indian Matchmaking. But what I really connected to in Dolly's character is that, this sense of self-delusion that she has, where she feels that just because, she's been kind of conditioned to accept that, I have to have the husband and the children and the job and the car and the apartment, and then of course then I'll be fine and then I'm happy. And she's just kept herself really busy with all of these things. And it's a very hectic kind of distracted world where there's no stillness to kind of just look into herself to see whether any of that is ringing true, and if that's an authentic life she's leading. And I think that what I love about the character and about the film, what Alankrita has done, is that she's kind of done away with the niceties. She's done away with the usual conventions of how women are depicted on screen. It's like we have this unspoken code of what we're allowed to show women do on screen and what we're not allowed to show women do on screen. And these are very everyday things. This a brother-in-law hitting on a sister-in-law, or the home not being a safe space for women, or children going through some gender identity issues. Some children, these are things which are just not acknowledged. Which is, I'm so grateful that that is there in this film to begin with. And I love the fact that as a character, there is a transition that she goes through because of her child Pappu, because of her cousin Kitty. She is actually able to, so something which she initially kind of just dismisses, and she's like, oh, bubbles, and ha ha ha, it's all your fault. She's actually able to kind of go through that journey and come to a place where she is able to see herself truly for what she is, and that immediately impacts her relationship with her child, her mother, her cousin, her husband, and everybody around her. Which leads us to the question that if so many women and perhaps men, if so many people are living unfulfilled lives because of what society is expecting from us, then what are the repercussions that it's having in other places? Is it coming out as bitterness, as resentment? In other places, it can come out, it can manifest in many unhealthy ways, which is at the beginning of the film.
And Dolly's character is able to break free, but many women in real life are not. And Alankrita, that's partly because there's so much cultural sanction. For example, the rambling joint family. There are so many jokes and there are so many songs about, for example, a man hitting on his wife's sister. They're even woven into our wedding songs. There's so much entrenched cultural sanction and looking the other way from this. So were you scared of ruffling feathers? I mean, we live in such populist times where everyone jumps on us for the smallest little challenge to the dominant narrative. And here the suggestion of unwanted touch within the family, wife, sister. Given the kind of jokes and the kind of indulgence that we've seen, only half jokingly about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, at the cost of sounding, not correct, but I feel that I don't think I was. I felt any kind of fear in terms of making this film or telling this story, or that worry. I don't think that I had that worry that will I ruffle some feathers. I would say that maybe I've just I'm able to tell this story because somehow I don't know what it is. I don't think too much about who's going to watch the film and what they're going to feel. And unlike many filmmakers, I feel, who are very constantly thinking about what the audience will feel, what the audience will want, what will they like. I just feel like this is the story that's coming to me and I want to tell this story. Will I like it? Does it make sense to me? And I found that, that kind of works well for me as a way of operating. And then I feel that I am, of course, aware. And I think I became very aware of it, when I had to fight all those battles against the banning and the censorship of lipstick, that, you don't know when you're going to ruffle feathers and when people are going to. So there's nothing you can do. You have to just be true and honest to yourself. And of course, if you have to deal with opposition, you just have to deal with it. And there's no other way. So I think, I'm really not thinking too much about how people will react.
No, I agree. You can't keep looking over your shoulder and be creatively free. But here's what I have to ask both of you, because this is a feminist parable, right? It's a fun film. It has great moments of lightness and humor, but its core is letting women be who we want to be. This notion of unwanted touch is something we've all been through, right? Whether it's in our families, whether it's in public spaces, whether it's school, it's colleges. It led to the Metoo movement. The Metoo movement is today at an inflection point in your industry. I want to ask both of you how you're looking at what's happened with the Anurag Kashyap case triggering a wider debate, with it getting politicized. Is this movement still salvageable? Is its core still salvageable? I'll start with you, Alankrita.
So I just want to take one step back and from what my limited understanding, like I feel the Me Too movement came about because our systems were not willing and not able to were not addressing concerns of women who were being assaulted, and there was a gap. There was no legal kind of recourse, and I do feel that initially when I think the Me Too movement has been largely successful in America, but I think in India patriarchy is really really sort of deep rooted, and therefore I think it had very limited kind of like an effect over here. But I do feel that particularly in what has just come up, I honestly haven't been able to follow like too much. I've just seen like little bits and pieces of what's happening. I just feel that uh, of course, if there is some sense of somebody has been assaulted or whatever has been harassed, there should be an investigation. At the same time, I feel that it's important that it doesn't become a tool to stifle political dissent. That is very, very important. And the other thing is that, particularly in this case, I feel bringing up the names of Richa Chadda, Huma Qureshi, and I think Mahi Gill, that just threw me off. I thought that was, it wasn't making sense as to why, because Me Too is so much about women standing up for each other. It's not about making comments about other women. And I thought that was something that bothered me. So, yeah.
Yeah, Konkona, let me ask you just with a little question of my own. At the heart of the Me Too movement was women believing women. At the heart of your movie is women's friendship, women's bonding, right? But somewhere what happens is that when we generalize this, when we embrace this as our truth, as so many of us have, and then suddenly there comes a moment when you will be mocked. So you said you believe women. So if you believe all women, why aren't you believing this woman if you're not, right? So that's, I think, the dilemma for feminists that the Anurag Kashyap Payal Ghosh episode has thrown up. How do you see it?
I understand what you're asking. I have to say I haven't seen the video about the Richa Chadha Huma Mahi thing, but I do know a little bit about it. What I want to say is that, the Me Too movement itself, while I think it is a very important movement, and as you said, Alankrita, and I agree with you that it fills a gap. It's very wide in its range. You know what I mean? Like there are crimes and assaults, and there are misdemeanors and creepy behavior, so that itself is very wide, and itself is very difficult to kind of find one answer to all cases. Of course, it's very important that we believe women, because by and large historically we have seen that we don't, and very often it's very powerful men against against not powerful women. My only worry in this situation is that it should never be used as a tool to stifle voices of those who are in political opposition to the mainstream narrative. That should not be a tool to silence dissent. And if it's not, that's wonderful. Of course, we should believe women. Of course, there should be an investigation. And, in many cases, I think people have approached their lawyers and they're looking into it. And I'm hardly an expert. I do want to believe women. I just hope that this is not the case.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think what's interesting is that, as you said, almost every protagonist in this episode has gone to their lawyers. So actually, it's reminding us that in the end, legal processes, as painful as they are, as long and complex as they are, cannot be overlooked in any feminist battle. Coming back to the film Alankrita, sex and women, where we don't talk about it openly, then as a filmmaker, do you sometimes find yourself fighting a different kind of stereotype? Let me explain what I mean, right? So where there is now a trope of Indian women, a sexually boring marriage, a loveless marriage, a slightly clumsy husband, a slightly clumsy, awkward husband, and that woman only being able to find that happiness outside of her marriage. Do you worry that you might be replacing, and this is a contrarian question, is not what I think, but there are people who will ask it, do you worry that you might be replacing one stereotype with another?
I hope not. And, as a filmmaker, one tries to not replicate stereotypes and perpetuate them. I personally feel that for me, like my films are very driven by the choices I feel those characters would make in that moment, in that situation. And if they make that choice and they find in that journey that they are going to, like, for instance, Dolly's character is going to have an affair with the delivery boy, then it's driven from the need of that character. I definitely feel like one can't impose situations and say this is the way to solve X's problem or Y's problem, which is why, so I feel that one has to be true to the characters, to their truth and their specific and unique reality and the choices they'll make in that moment. So even Dolly, if Kitty hadn't come, maybe she wouldn't have an affair with the delivery boy. So something has triggered her. She's in a different place in time. So I think being specific and being honest is what enables me to make certain choices for my characters. And I definitely am not into, like, I feel sometimes it can happen subconsciously, but I do think we should guard against perpetuating any kind of stereotype.
Konkona, let me ask you a contrarian question as well. If these two characters were men and they were making exactly the same choices, because after all, you did make the point that men can be as much victims of patriarchy, right? So there are men, I know, and all have friends like this, who are also trapped in marriages that they don't particularly enjoy anymore. They may not hate them, but they don't particularly enjoy them. They feel the societal pressure to be the provider, to be the caregiver, to be the person who sort of brings the money home. And if they have affairs, they are judged in a completely different way. So when women have affairs, it's kind of like we're finding ourselves, at least in a certain class of, privilege. But when men have affairs, we judge them quite harshly, don't we? I'm being contrarian, but I think we can push this conversation
That's totally
further.
fine. That's how interesting to answer these questions. That's totally fine. I think that, ideally, I wouldn't want to judge anyone who's having an affair. I personally really believe in the institution of marriage. I'm all for it. If some people think it works for them, why not? That's wonderful. I think that so much goes into adultery, and that is such a personal choice. You don't really know what's going on in a marriage. You don't know if the other person is being adulterous. You don't know if they have some sexual or health issues. I mean, we don't know these things. And I don't think that one should invite judgment upon men or women in that situation. I think why it has happened is that, I think historically what has happened is that women are dependent, or have been, a large proportion of women are dependent on men financially. And I keep going back to this because I find that to be the crux of so many issues. So that it's always a choice. If you're in a marriage, it's out of choice. It's not because you have to pay the rent together, or it's not because you're depending on something. And I don't really want to judge anyone for adultery. I think it's A, none of my business, and B, it's, they'll figure it out for themselves.
Okay, I have to ask you in the end, because I'm being told that my time's up, but I have to ask you another interesting question in the end. When you look at the characters of Dolly and Kitty, or when you look at your own lives, so many of us have had to unlearn things that we believed in when we were young. If I asked both of you, what would you tell your 16-year-old self? Or what would Dolly and Kitty tell their 16-year-old selves? What would that be? That one truth you know today that you did not know when you were 16, 17, 18. So, Alankrita, what would you tell your 16-year self?
It's so funny that you asked this question, because, I've had a very real experience with what I thought my life would be and what it is. I definitely feel that when I was 16, around 16, 17, I definitely thought that, by the time, I don't know why I thought that, maybe I just, but I definitely thought that by the time I'm 30, I'll be married and I'll have 2 kids. And I had some idea of a very conventional life. So I definitely, and I thought that it would just naturally, my life would be like that. I don't know why I thought that. And I'm very happy that, with the life that I lead. But definitely, I think, those are the ideas that are sort of stuck. And no one ever told me that. But it was what I sort of believed in. So that was
the time
interesting.
Brought up, that was the prevalent kind of attitudes that we inherited. I would, I think, tell my younger self that, and not as Dolly, I don't know so much as Dolly, but as myself, I would probably tell my younger self things. One is to not be scared. One is to not be so scared. And the other thing is that, everything just keeps changing. Even if you think that, life is going to be one particular way, and even if you want that to remain, it's not going to. And even if you're going through a bad situation, so if you're feeling bad about yourself or you're feeling good about yourself, none of that is going to remain constant, and it's going to keep changing. And that in itself is so reassuring for me.
Well, I just want to say in the end, thank you. We need more women telling women's stories. I enjoyed the film. For all of you who haven't seen it, please do watch it. you will see shades of your own life, even if exaggerated. That's the whole point of cinema. It amplifies things that we all carry within. You will see shades of your life, your conflicts, your dreams, your desires. And let's not be scared to say the word desire when it comes to women. Konkona and Alankrita, congratulations and thank you so much. And everybody else, please do watch Dolly, Kitty, or wo Chamakte, Sitare. That title only is a winner. Thank you. Thank you so much and bye.
On
Thank you.
Netflix.
Thank
Barkha.
you. Thank
Bye.
you.